Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us with your busy schedule virtually. I'd like you to take a moment and get comfortable. Make sure that you have whatever you need, tea, something to drink, so that you can engage with this learning. We're so happy to share with you today. The California Subject Matter Projects is presenting Humanizing Professional Learning, Equity, Agency, and Well-Being across the California Subject Matter Projects. I'm Margaret Peterson, Executive Director of the California World Language Project, and I'm doing this intro on behalf of Claudia Martinez, Executive Director of all 9 of our California Subject Matter Projects. The vision of CSMP: every student in California deserves to learn and thrive with teachers who affirm and connect to their strengths, their values, their languages, and their cultures in order to amplify their learning. CSMP supports teachers to make this a reality. The purpose and objectives of our panel today: we want to show you how CSMP programs support equity, instructional innovation, and teacher well-being through sustained communities of practice and professional learning opportunities. The effective professional learning that we're going to talk about includes humanizing pedagogy, culturally responsive instruction, and systemic support for teacher agency. We're going to show you 3 disciplines, but we are a part of a larger organization of 9 disciplines. We'll give you very specific examples of how our professional learning leads to measurable improvements in teacher practice. And finally, the evidence-based insights you'll see today inform the broader efforts that we have to design equitable, sustainable models of teacher professional growth. All right, I'm going to turn it over to John now. John, you can introduce yourself as well.
Thank you, Margaret. Thank you for having me here today. My name is John Kovach, and I am the site director of the California Science Project in Irvine at the University of California, Irvine. And I'm here on behalf of Maria Semani, the executive director of the California Science Project. We have over 9 science projects across California, and our mission is to develop and enhance teachers' collective science content and knowledge and pedagogical practices in order to support high quality science education for all students. Now, the California Science Project also has some guiding principles that support teachers' thinking and basically our thinking as well. And you can look on the screen here to see the 5 different principles that kind of guide our work and around deepening teachers' knowledge, particularly around the different frameworks that we have. And if you notice, it's not just the science framework, it's also the ELD framework, and most recently the California Science Computer Science Standards as well. We're also here to enhance teachers' instructional differentiational strategies to improve all students. So science is just not for a selected few in California, it's for every student. We offer technical assistance evaluation, and we also support the development of teachers with with experience to become teacher leaders. So we're not always the ones that are leading the work. That work is coming from expertise all over the state of California. Today, I've highlighted one of these principles, and they are the idea of being able to create professional learning communities. And this idea of creating a professional learning community using teacher action and evidence-based and reflection practices is something we're going to talk about today. And particularly, we're going to talk around the idea of integrating computer science into not only science class, but into STEM as a whole. So I'd like you just to take a moment and think to yourself, do you consider yourself tech savvy? Why might you consider yourself tech savvy or not? And then as you think about that, what might a tech savvy person look like or sound like to you? So we all bring in our own experiences, our own context to probably answer these questions. And maybe some of these experiences are positive, maybe some of these experiences are negative, maybe some of these experiences haven't affected us either way. But when we think about the idea of integrating computer science, I thought, what might AI come up with? And think what that looks like, that tech savvy person. And so you can imagine, you'd probably already think about like, it's probably this. And so let's take a look at that picture. And this is some AI generated uh, uh, pictures or images from the prompt. What do tech savvy individuals look like? So probably pretty stereotypical that you see there. And what we need to do is we need to, as a state, to think about that come to the idea that everyone is tech savvy, that everyone holds the identity as a computer scientist. And the work that we were able to do through this grant was really around that piece of the mission of how do we help individuals really think of themselves as computer scientists to be able to teach others. So, just to give you a little data to start off, here's the percentage of high schools offering foundational computer science by state. And you can see there's a large graph there. It might be a little hard to see. It's a little hard to shift over. And just take a moment. Where might you think California lands? And by that arrow, we're going to see that California lands pretty close to the bottom, believe it or not. Now, there's some different factors for this, and you can look at this data and some of those factors on the bit.ly that we've put on there for you. And granted, this data is a little bit older. Believe it's around 2019, but as you can imagine, we haven't really climbed that much higher yet. And some of those reasons could be that computer science is not a required course in California, the lack of credentials for computer science in the state of California. So this is something that Marie and I have had in-depth talk around, and we decided that maybe the best approach to help students get a start with computer science and teachers get a start with computer science is to think about integration. How do we integrate computer science and computational thinking into other subjects? So we were fortunate enough to have this grant, and myself and a colleague from UCLA, Justin Betzelberger, who is the associate director of the science project there, we were able to work together along with teachers in Orange County and Los Angeles to help create this learning experience, almost a 2-year learning experience for teachers around integrating computational thinking practices into STEM, helping teachers have approaches to embed computer science topics and ideas and experiences into classrooms, and also increase the most important piece for us was increasing that collective teacher efficacy around computing. Right? So you can think back to how you answer that question around tech savvy. A lot of our teachers might have answered the same way that you were thinking. Overall, we were able to serve about 40 teachers, and this was through 3 cohorts. There was 1 cohort at UCLA, 2 cohorts at UCI, and each teacher received around 30 to 38 hours of professional learning. And the questions that helped guide our thinking throughout this process, again, the idea of efficacy. We felt when teachers were able to become comfortable, be able to think of themselves as computer scientists, to able to engage in that idea around identity as computer scientists, that might be able to increase the interactions and that integration within their classroom. And then we also looked at what structures might be best to help support this integration, to see what teachers could create or how they might use these approaches in their classroom. So we're going to just run through both questions. And the first question around increasing teacher efficacy towards computing, our focus was really in around identity. And Justin and Marie and I really thought long and hard about this. And on the screen here, we have this idea of what identity is from Gholdy Muhammad. And it's composed of those positive and negative ways. And we can all think about even our daily use of technology, those positive and negative ways that we interact with technology every day. And I think that highlighted piece or that bolded piece is to our advantage. Identity is always dynamic and changing, right? So if we're able to give teachers those opportunities to think about who they are, not only as a teacher, but as a computer scientist and a science teacher, a computer scientist and a math teacher, that they might be able to build that efficacy towards integrating those topics. So, along with that question, what we came to kind of find out, or some insight because we're still kind of processing this data right now. So some early thinking for us is that it's really important. It was really important for us to establish that professional community learning, right, from day one. So really provide a space, that safe space for teachers to take chances and to interact with one another. Another big part was to really provide opportunities for reflection. So during our professional learning, and even at the end of the day, and not just towards the end, we constantly ask teachers framed questions around CS, computer science, CT, computational thinking, efficacy, and how that affected their identity as that computer scientist. And then finally, something we both were really interested in, we found out to be somewhat important, is this idea of teacher playtime. It's giving teachers space to make mistakes, giving teachers space to talk to one another, to try things out. And this really came from, I was talking to Justin earlier today, and Justin was fortunate enough to teach in Germany a few years ago when his children were younger. And he was talking about when we first created this PD, but we were thinking about like how play is such an important piece in Europe in those younger years. And I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of TK teachers and work with TK across the state. And it's been really interesting for me to learn how play is so important in learning about science, especially at that young age. So we thought, well, let's transfer that piece over to professional learning and see how that might work. So, just to give you a visual of what that might look like, for one of the cohorts, we went out to the UCI Ecological Preserve, and teachers were able to play with the technology around questions they just generated by just walking around the preserve. So in other words, there was really no lab book, no guided questions to measure this or that. We basically start off saying, this is a wonderful place. You probably have a lot of questions about it. Here are some experts you can talk to along the way. And what they did is they took these little handheld computers called microbits and they just collected data that was interesting to them. And they were able to have conversations about the interactions that they saw around the ecological preserve, or generate more questions, particularly around climate change, or even just some really simple things like, I saw this many different types of birds, or I saw this many different types of insects. So it was an incredible 2 hours of just playing around this technology. And the best part about this for me was we did this at the beginning. And so a lot of these teachers had no experience using a microbit. And what this did, by the end of our cohort, teachers were able to program these microbits to collect data that they wanted to collect. So this portion of play really laid a foundational piece to learning about how that microbit worked and how computational thinking works in a classroom. I also like to offer some data, just some anecdotal data from some surveys. These are from Justin's cohorts, and you can take a look at them. And I tried to choose some that were particular around efficacy. And what you see here is teachers really becoming comfortable over the time that we have with them together. Teachers becoming more secure about their knowledge that they are maybe already had about using technology and their willingness to be able to share. And then also too that they're willing now to work with their students, that they don't feel intimidated around this to work with their students. So the second question that we looked at was this idea of professional learning and these structures to increase computational thinking integration. And for some of you that don't know, computational thinking is a way to problem solve. It's a way to look at really complex problems and break them down, decompose them into smaller, manageable pieces, right? And this is a way of thinking that programmers use. But when you take this out of the idea of computer science, you find out that computational thinking is very valuable in other subjects. The idea of problem solving, of how we approach problems and look at problems. So when we were designing this to think about how might we help teachers support this kind of, most of our teachers had no idea what computational thinking was, what it meant, and when they heard about it, they were very intimidated. So one of the things that we did was we wanted to make sure that teachers had a chance to look at what we call a wicked problem, a problem that is very that it goes beyond complicated to complex, a problem that has many issues wrapped around it, a problem that doesn't really have any answers to it, right? So we think of climate change as kind of a wicked problem, right? And this work, actually, the idea of wicked problems comes out of city planning back in the 70s. And so we gave teachers opportunities to examine wicked problem through the lens of CT. Uh, another way that we helped, a structure that we put into professional learning, was to really make connections to computational thinking and our lives that it already exists there, and reframe the language that they're using, right? So you can think of uh, uh, maybe brushing your teeth, right? And brushing your teeth is really like an algorithm, right? In a way. And then finally, once again, teacher playtime came up. The idea of giving teachers time to play around this idea of computer science and computational thinking, and how do we integrate that in. And one of the ways that we did this was by using machine learning and getting teachers a chance to play around with ways to figure out if what they were looking at was a sandwich. And I wish I would have more time to go into that one, but unfortunately we can't. But just to show you some data from from this question around computational thinking, obviously this is a really small uh, sample size that we have. I'm still working on collecting these responses from teachers, but we see here over time that teachers, I should say over time, but we see here at the end of my second cohort with a small group of teachers, they felt confident in integrating computational thinking into their lessons, with 50% agreeing and then 50% strongly agreeing. And then if you look below, they start to see that computational thinking has value to their instruction, right? That they can use these terms and they can use these processes to help students solve problems within their class and help them solve larger problems that are throughout the world. And a few anecdotal stories here for you. Go ahead and click through them. This is from Justin's cohort. They actually went in to do some lesson study around computational thinking. And here's a story about Lionel, who is a third grader, and he's an emerging multilingual learner. Attendance is around 75%. Not very engaged in class. But when they were able to use the practices around computational thinking and computer science, that changed. He became very engaged and motivated. He was actually able to translate computer code into English and in math class. And he also did some programming around the microbits and did his own programming and was very successful. So just one student there to let you take a look at. And then finally, kind of a wrap up, what we learned, some overarching things that I'll probably repeat here, but computational thinking really supports students, in the classroom. It allows them to approach complex problems and solve them. It really provides a space for deeper critical thinking. And what I think is the most important piece, it allows them to identify themselves as a computer science or in STEM. So they see themselves that hopefully later on, these students will go into these fields as well, where typically they are, dominated by people that look like me, white males. And so these identity pieces are so important so that students know that so they can see themselves in a field that maybe where people don't look like them. We also found that playtime is really important to develop teacher advocacy. And I'm not sure what we're going to go on that. And I think as a PD provider, a PL provider, there's a tension, right, with having to get things done and allowing teachers to play, but that play was just so important. We also collaborate with a lot of experts along the way to help us better understand computational thinking and computer science. And then finally, we noticed that having female leadership along with us is really important to this work. And that having female leaders in computer science really made kind of gave us a different lens to typically a field that is, again, dominated by males. And having those females there really helped other teachers that were in our program feel comfortable and safe around some of this work. So thank you very much. And I just want to leave you with this quote. And I think this holds true not only for students, but also us individuals, that we're constantly moving around either toward or away of that computer identity, right? That computing identity. So thank you.
All right, Kyndall, I'll hand it over to you now.
All right, thank you very much, Margaret. So I'm the executive director of the California Mathematics Project, and you see our mission statement on the screen that the mission of the California Mathematics Project is to develop and enhance K-12 teachers' content knowledge and instructional strategies aligned with the California State Board of Education adopted California mathematics content standards and framework. And so what I'm going to be talking about today is a particular program within the California Mathematics Project known as the California Action Network for Mathematics Excellence and Equity, or CANME. And CANME is a signature program of the California Mathematics Project, and we are a group of researchers, practitioners, and other interested partners who use lesson study to connect mathematics excellence and equity and work together to address a common problem of practice and shift to an assets-based culture of learning. So our chosen problem of practice is that our mathematics system, our mathematics education system is unjust and unequal by design. Therefore, it can be redesigned. So what is lesson study? It's a simple idea. If you want to improve instruction, what could be more obvious than collaborating with fellow teachers to plan instruction and then examine its impact on students? So in lesson study, teachers bring their own questions to the table to seek answers from one another, from outside specialists and research, and from a careful study of their own students. So what does lesson study look like? So the traditional lesson study, it's a team of teachers who get together to work on a problem of practice. They're usually directed by a facilitator. They're focusing on their students, and they usually have an outside expert known as a math commentator who provides support and feedback to the team on the math content of the lesson that they're designing. CANME lesson study is a little bit different if you hit return again. What we've added to the process is the idea of focal students, that each teacher in the team chooses 3 to 4 students in their classroom that they want to know more about and study about. And we've also added the role of an outside expert who is really going to attend to the equity aspects of the lesson that we call an equity commentator. And so in our equity-focused design, we have taken the traditional PDSA cycle and tweaked it a little bit. Instead of plan, do, study, act, our cycle is study, plan, test, and reflect. In the study phase of lesson study, teachers study their students, their curricular materials, their frameworks, the research, and they use that information to try to come up with a lesson that's going to meet the needs of their focal students. They take that information into the planning phase where they design a cognitively demanding math lesson that's aligned to the California mathematics framework. And it's really designed to meet the needs of the focal students. So as they're designing, they're really anticipating how the focal students are going to respond and react, and they plan and they try to come up with all of the different possibilities to meet the needs of the focal students. In the teach and the test phase, one of the teachers teaches the lesson, teaches a public lesson where they invite outside visitors, the commentators, all the members of the team to observe one of the teachers teaching the lesson that they collectively designed. And then in the reflect phase, the teacher who taught the lesson reflects on the lesson study team reflects on the lesson, and then they get feedback from both the math and the equity commentator. The math commentator is focusing on the mathematical content of the lesson, the cognitive demand of the lesson, and the equity commentator is focusing on how the classroom, the lesson was designed with equitable teaching practices to specifically meet the needs of the focal students. And then the teachers take that information and they can use it to redesign the lesson, or they can start a brand new cycle. So there are three cornerstones to our lessons, to our equity-focused lesson study process. And one is this idea of a dual focus on math and equity, because what we found traditionally is that teachers either tend to focus on the mathematics at the expense of the equity, or they'll focus on equitable teaching practices to the expense of the grade level cognitively demanding mathematics. And so our work in this process is to really maintain a dual focus on the math and equity. Another cornerstone is the focal students, and that third cornerstone is equity competitors. And at the heart of it is making sense of mathematics. And so who are our focal students? So Dudley in 2013 referred to case pupils that teachers will tend to identify that they want to learn more about. And so then rather than testing the lesson just on case pupils, we're designing a lesson for the focal students, and the focal students are chosen so that they're representative of lots of other students in the class. So we feel that if we're designing a lesson to meet the needs of the focal students, we're also going to be meeting the needs of all the students in the class. The teachers identify 3 to 5 students that they want to support better, and particularly students traditionally marginalized in the math classroom or in education at large. And so why focal students? To discover students' assets and to design and adjust instruction for all students. To give students opportunities to exercise their agency. To encourage and recognize the contributions of focal students. To practice noticing with colleagues. To become a champion for every student. And to learn to see, listen to, and understand our students. So who are the focal students that we choose? Students who can teach us something. Students who want to be valued and respected for their mathematical thinking. Students who want to make their way of thinking visible. Students who want to tell their stories. Students who want to understand mathematics as a tool for their life, and students who want to exercise agency in the math class. And so our keystone protocols for the CAMI lesson study process are class surveys. So we have teachers survey their entire class, and based upon those surveys, they choose the focal students that they conduct empathy interviews with. And then based upon the empathy interviews, they write assets-based descriptions of the students, hit return. And those assets-based descriptions are also based on observations of the students. And so when we're talking about assets-based descriptions, these are descriptions of the focal students, and they are assets-based. They include the student's prior knowledge, both cognitive and affective. They include what the students do understand. They also include outside of class attributes. They identify mathematics and equity goals, and most importantly, they avoid deficit perspectives of students. So the research question for our study is, how does the use of focal students create a way for teachers to operationalize notions of equity throughout the lesson study process? And so for our methods, in the spring of 2021, the CANME Steering Committee members conducted 12 focus group interviews. Each focus group was comprised of a single lesson study teams, and sometimes the lesson study facilitator was present. And the interviews were conducted over Zoom and transcribed for analysis. And the two authors of this report analyzed the transcripts by reading them and coding segments of the transcripts where teachers discussed the ideas of focal students or their particular focus students. And we then organized these segments into themes, which we present next. And so our major findings were that teachers build meaningful relationships with the focal students that they wouldn't have under other circumstances. The teachers develop a new understanding about the experiences of their focal students. Teachers created new learning opportunities specifically to meet the needs of those focal students, and that the teachers and the commentators' observations relied on the focal students. And so in conclusion and overall, we find the use of focal students a powerful adaptation of lesson study that supports teachers to make positive changes in their teaching. We found that the incorporation of focal students supported the development of positive teacher-student relationships and created opportunities for focal students to engage in mathematics in new ways, and that the notion of focal students within lesson study appears to be a promising way to support teachers in taking actions that are more equitable. So, thank you.
Thank you, Kyndall. Appreciate that. That was so engaging, and boy, I just want to take that and use it in the world language classroom now. All right, again, I'm Margaret Peterson. I'm Executive Director of the California World Language Project, and I have my colleague here with me, Dr. Eduardo Muñoz-Muñoz, who is the Director of the Stanford World Language Project. And we're going to share with you some research about world languages. First, we're going to start with our mission statement. The California World Language Project empowers world language teachers. That includes heritage language teachers, dual language immersion teachers, traditional world language teachers, anyone who teaches language, to have equity-centered, standards-aligned professional learning and leadership development that will help students gain language proficiency, linguistic proficiency, intercultural skills and knowledge, and being able to interact with people from different cultures, and global competency. This is for all students in California, TK through 12. Every student can learn another language. I'm going to share a video with you to explain a little bit about what Summer Seminar is, because our research is based on our Summer Seminar. You can just watch for a couple of minutes.
kind of world language project site, anything where there's CLTA, it's automatic networking, you feel part of a community, you don't feel alone because teaching it can be very isolated, but you get this whole family, this whole network that comes with being part of CLTA. If you don't join, then you're missing out on all these great people, great company, everything.
All right. So this summer seminar has been going on for 36 years. And we who are products of summer seminar know the impact that it has had, and it really has changed lives in so many ways. So we decided to do a study on the actual statewide how we can shift pedagogy through practice with standards-based professional learning. So we had 2 research questions. The first is, how does the sustained professional learning influence teachers' practices in the classroom to have student-centered instruction and standards-aligned instruction? And how does the sustained professional learning shape teachers' beliefs about their own self-efficacy, their level of burnout, and their overall sense of thriving? So our longitudinal study was over 2 cohorts from 2023 and 2024. It's a mixed method study with both surveys on Qualtrics and focus groups, interviews with teachers. And we had 88 teachers in 2023 and 95 teachers in 2024 who agreed to participate in this study. There were more teachers at the summer seminar. Some of them were in and out or leading the strands, and so those teachers were not part of the study. On average, we have about 120 to 140 teachers come together to live in the dorms at UC Santa Barbara. The teachers completed surveys before the summer seminar started, immediately after it was over, and then about 4 months into the fall, once they went back to school. We also did focus groups with 27 teachers who volunteered to come and join us again and in the fall and reflect on the effect that the summer seminar had on their practice. So these were both 40-hour programs in 2023 and 2024.
In our research, we pursued a number of constructs in the realm of quantitative data. We were using the Maslach Burnout Inventory Educator Survey, also the General Self-Efficacy Scale, a brief inventory of thriving, and importantly as well, CWLP's Teaching Competency Assessment Tool, the TCAT, which deserves special mentioning because it is how we are defining the profession of world language teachers in alignment with the current California framework for world languages. We also did qualitative data, which, as mentioned, it was including focus groups that had an optimum number of 3 to 5 teachers. They were recorded on Zoom with 60-minute sessions, and the interview protocol basically included 4 open-ended questions about teaching practices and student outcomes related to the experiences also that they have had in the summer seminar. Then, to ensure the validity and inter-rater reliability, these were coded by 2 researchers to ensure that what we were seeing was actually there.
Right. And so for the teacher competency assessment tool, as Eduardo just mentioned, it is our way of measuring how teachers were implementing standards-based instruction. So you'll see 2023 is the blue line and 2024 is the dotted line. So both in 2023 and 2024, we see a gain in teachers' ability to know and use standards-based instruction with their students. So you can see pre and post an improvement. And I'm going to just give you a hint. Look at 23 and the way it kind of goes up and then dips. And then look at 24, the way it goes up and it continues to go up. And I'll explain a little bit our theory on that in a moment. For the Maslach Burnout Inventory, we see a reduction in burnout for teachers that was statistically significant, particularly in 2024. Again, you see this peak in 2023 and then kind of leveling off. But in 2024, the burnout continues to decrease at a statistically significant level. For the General Self-Efficacy Scale, again in 2023, you see the peak at the end of summer seminar. So there's a big difference between the pre and post, and then kind of levels off again. And then for 2024, you see that there was a significant gain in self-efficacy for teachers even over time. For the brief inventory of thriving, you can see that it is approaching statistical significance in 2024. And again, you see this little dip. So you see in 2023 where it peaked and then it kind of went down. In 2024, it continued to rise. And so here's our thinking on that. In 2023, it was the 40 hours straight up, just that 1 week. And you know what happens when teachers get excited and they get so thrilled by whatever they're learning all together. And then summer's over, they go back to reality. And their reality is they're not always, or they're usually not, institutionally, structurally, systemically supported at their own school site. And so in 2024, we added a booster. And that booster was a reunion, a free reunion that we offered to everybody who attended summer seminar to come in and have a webinar together just for the day. They could choose the topic that they wanted to. We gave them the post survey then, and we believe that that is most likely why we saw that the added impact that continued to show a decrease in burnout, an increase in self-efficacy, and that upward trend of thriving.
Well, when it comes to the focus groups and the qualitative findings, two themes emerged. And as we see represented in the graphic, these come interwoven into teacher realization. Teachers were describing as a result, as a consequence of the summer seminar, an increase in knowledge of content, standards, and pedagogy, that is their growth, their experience as educators, together with underlying beliefs about community, social justice, and wellness. That leads to a realization of the profession per se of world language teachers, that leads to that wellness, to that area in the Venn diagram. Additionally, we would like to share with you some quotes that reflect the sort of learning that was happening and that was also documented through the quantitative information that this gives a story to the quantitative information that Margaret was just sharing a moment ago. For example, with regards to authentic materials and target language and the knowledge of content standards, I am using a lot of authentic resources and I keep on talking in the language. The students are happy and the parents are happy. That is a virtuous cycle. Then, more on knowledge of content standards and the idea of being cultural responsive, of implementing cultural responsive teaching, which is part of our standards in the state. I am not just emphasizing the target language culture, but also the culture of my students. This is a testimony by a high school world language teacher. When it comes to community and social justice, a high school world language teacher says, having that community within the classroom has helped students interact with one another, which is the very realization of being a world language educator, where language is being put into practice and there's human interaction. Students, DLI teacher added as well, students feel that my culture is acknowledged, and this creates more excitement, inclusion, and crucially, participation, which is what we want in language settings, in language development settings. When it comes to wellness, a DLI teacher also states, meditation is helping me be calm, even if it's chaos. I can control some things, so I can just be calm and mindful, which is certainly something that we can find very easy, very convenient and necessary these days.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that data. And we appreciate how you helped us conduct the focus interviews and just your presence there, Eduardo, is always so impactful. We love having you actively participating. And now sharing the analysis. So I just wanted to show you that this meditation is a part of summer seminar. We offer it to anyone who would like to learn, who comes to summer seminar. And we're able to continue this trajectory of social justice, anti-racist, world language education, and it's continuing to grow and inform the work that we're doing as we move forward. So we had a focus on AI this past year as a result of the study that we did over the last couple of years. And our ultimate finding is high quality professional learning programs. When you have an integration of pedagogical rigor, no matter what your discipline is, with emotional, social, emotional, and relational learning, this allows us to foster meaningful, sustainable change in teaching practices. And I think you've seen that through all three of our presentations today. So the significance of what we're doing for the field of teacher education, we can see that by having this collective experience, all the expertise that we have for the different disciplines that we come from, and this commitment to equity, we can have scalable professional learning models that could be offered throughout the state, throughout the nation, and say throughout the world too. So these studies show that sustained discipline-specific professional learning will enhance teacher practice with deep engagement in both the content and the pedagogy. It will strengthen teacher agency and professional identity, and it'll address systemic inequities by fostering culturally responsive, humanizing instructional approaches. And finally, the work contributes to the field by providing evidence-based models that are responding to our current challenges, and we have so many of them, right? This includes teacher burnout. It includes inequitable learning opportunities and the need for both professional community, that sense of community, that sense of belonging, and autonomy. Thank you so much for being with us today, and we are so delighted that you would share and stay all the way to the end. So thank you so much. Bye, everyone.